All right, so what I'm going to talk about today, just a short talk, is known as a multifunctional central pattern generator based neuromimetic control system. So that was the name we gave it. Obviously, my name's Jeremy Wojcik, and I guess we'll go ahead and get started. This is just research. I'm just going to preface this with, this is my first time participating in something like this. So this is very new to me, and I'm a mathematician by trade. So please bear with me if I go a little crazy on them. I'll try to stick to high level math stuff. But people on the team so far, it's me. We have a programmer named Wesley Chavez, who also works for my same company. John Thurman has also been involved in this, and along with Jason Guarneri from AFRL RV. We're currently under a contract, under a subcontract that's going to end here in just a couple of weeks. So the innovation. So we developed a control system based on what we call multifunctional central pattern generators. So central pattern generators in general are small biologically based neural networks, 2, 3, 4 cells, can go higher, but that they're dedicated to have one. Oftentimes there's a dedicated central pattern generator that will do one particular thing. It has one particular output rhythm, regardless of inputs or outputs. Multifunctional central pattern generators have the possibility for multiple output patterns, phase patterns, given different inputs. So unlike artificial neural networks, I do want to make sure we touch on this, because there are a lot. Obviously, ANNs are very popular right now. They're going to solve all the world's problems. Biological neural networks have temporal spatial dependencies that artificial neural networks don't. Artificial neural networks are basically big graph theory problems, and combinatorics that is what allows it to do a lot of the things that it does. Biological neural networks are different. They're much richer dynamics, and it's that time dependency, and that gives us those different phase lags. So we have to look at how we interpret the solution space for biological neural networks differently. So in invertebrates, especially, I worked a lot on invertebrates a long time ago, and central pattern generators and neurons from invertebrates. So a lot of these pictures are sort of loosely based on some of those invertebrate work I did. But it's the central pattern generators will interact with higher brain functions through invertebrates through the spinal cord. It's been shown in a few places that there's a lot of these little central pattern generators, or relatively small neural networks that aggregates information as it's going up to the brain, so that the brain doesn't actually feel every little sensory input and have to deal with that. It's actually, what it does is sort of aggregates a lot of that information, comes up with what it thinks is the solution to a particular issue, sensory input, and it'll relay that up to the brain, but the brain can always override whatever it is. We refer to this as, it's like a nervous system and for the reflex actions. If I grab something hot, it doesn't, with my hand, it doesn't have to go, the sensory inputs of something hot does not have to go all the way to my brain process it and come back down. I just let go of it because it's hot. The other example is, if I really need to pick up that hot object, even though it's going to hurt or it's hot, my brain can force me to pick up that object. So that's just kind of the two-way street of how these interact with higher brain functions. For the sake of illustration, I'm going to talk about, because we're going to be talking about these temporal spatial dependencies, it's a lot easier to talk about this with just a 3-cell network, because we're going to talk about phase differences. And this is extensible to higher dimensions and larger neuron sets. It's just harder to visualize anything bigger than 3 cells. 3-cell phase differences means we have 2 different sets of phase differences that makes us naturally, from a mathematical standpoint, fall on a torus. The nice thing about the torus is we can flatten that. We can cut it open and we can have, we can see the solution space in the bottom corner here, in the bottom right corner. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but so various forms of CPGs have been used in robotics for close to a decade, especially if you're talking about rhythmic behaviors such as walking. This is what I'm showing here on the right is a work by and I'm people kill my name. I'm going to kill this gentleman's name. His spirit. No, I'm not trying to be mean about it. I'm not sure, but he developed a walking salamander based on CPGs. And so what we see here is if we're walking or swimming, he was able to make this robot be able to switch between those two motions and even going over obstacles. And how we do that is these central pattern generators will have basins of attraction. So even small deviations from their normal behavior will be able to reconverge to the solution so that it'll continue moving. And this is even in very complicated controls. So what we really want is the thing that's missing in Ishbiert's work. I should really figure out how to say his name. Actually, I've never said it out loud. I've just read his papers. What we really want to figure out is how we can. What he did was he actually had somebody change between the two gates. This was a little trick. It wasn't widely publicized, but for walking and swimming, there was actually a receiver on board the robot that another person would push that button in order to tell it to walk or to swim. So to switch between those two sets of central pattern generators that he shows. That's the outer set for walking was the 17, 18, 19, 20 in the diagram here. Those made a walking gait for each of the legs. The other ones, 1 through 16 down here, the middle in the blue, those were for the swimming motion, which is a little more complicated and there. So what we did was we actually have a way now that we can, depending upon a sensory input, we can actually change between different rhythms, as we'll show next. So there's two different ways that we can actually, for a network like this, there's two different ways that we can change. One of which is that we can change a rhythm. So these are the rhythms. These are voltage and membrane potentials, voltages off of each of these cells with the respective colors. And what they do is they will naturally form a pattern like this one pattern in the blue, in the light blue box. We see that we have blue firing with the green and the red in phase with each other, but both in out of phase with the blue. What that does in our phase diagram is it says that we're right here in the middle in this blue dot. And every solution in this blue, all of these blue lines dictate different initial conditions that will converge to the same spot. Similarly, we have we call this a traveling wave where one fires and the other, then it goes, continues back. This is called traveling wave. So what that does is puts us up here in this basin of attraction of this. We do this by just directly perturbing a cell. So we can directly perturb a cell and have it change its gait. Then we can perturb it again and we can move around to all of these different solutions. So these are different spatial temporal patterns based on phase delays. And that's how we can actually change between any of these rhythms. Next, we're just going to talk about, because I think I'm taking a little longer than I probably should. It's possible to also perturb the actual synaptic connections enough to change from a particular solution set. So this gives us 5 possible solutions here on the left. So this is like similar to if we're changing the weights on the edges of a artificial neural network. So if we change those weights on the edges, we're going to move on over to the right-hand side where each of these weights control, what I didn't say was these little brown dots that are separating the basins of attraction are actually what we call saddles, and they have an incoming and outgoing direction or separatrix. And that's how we separate two stable rhythms. It's in all dynamical systems. If I have two stable points, I have to have something in between them that's unstable that separates those 2 points. By changing the strength on these, and this is some other earlier work that based on some other earlier work in network bifurcation theory that we showed, what we can do is actually have these saddles will converge with different, these other different fixed points for the different rhythms and have what's called a saddle node bifurcation, and they will be annihilated. They'll become unstable. So in the case on the left here is we changed a couple of the connection strengths and we can have only one stable rhythm now, which is advantageous if we're, depending on the system, we may want to be able to quickly move in between different states, which would be here on the left, or we may want to have only one possible solution state. And we can do both of those things with this idea. So the Neuromometic, it's, as I said, it's capable of autonomous responses to time varying stimuli. So it's even as long as I'm grabbing something warm, maybe that thing starts to cool down. And now that stimulus changes, it's continuous, which means that it's based on a continuous voltage. So it doesn't have to, it's not digitized. It's not a 1 or a 0. There can be levels of how the temperature is affecting my sensory neurons that are coming up to my central pattern generator, which changes my response. And this does not need higher brain function in order to do it. So again, this idea is to help create this idea of an artificial nervous system. So it allows applications such as in terms of, we did this for, primary thing was autonomous actions and internal health monitoring of satellites. That is not the only application. I actually think this would be a wonderful thing to try for robotics, but also for prosthetics. It's something I'm very interested in applying this to. Since we can do this completely, I don't say it here, but oh yeah, I do say it here at the bottom. We don't necessarily have to write this in code. We can actually, these cells, the math behind them and where they came from are strictly analog. We can build these oscillators in analog. So real quick, we're running out of time. This is my hard part. I'm, need market potential. I'm a researcher. I don't always think about these things. As I said, it can be done in analog or digital, depending on how we want things to go. It can act autonomously, but it can also have control by higher order functions that limit what it can actually do. I think this is a great extension for AI ML, so artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies. I don't like the term artificial intelligence, but we'll use it because that's what everybody does. Should be virtual intelligence. But we don't need to have an entire brain. If we started trying to build up AI ML technologies by making smaller systems in a more biological way that's sort of in a fractal nature, I think that can go a long way to building up better AI systems in the future. Data and results, we did make a model, a real-time model using 4 Van der Pol style oscillators. They're known, the model we used was Fitz-Uniguma. These are just actual mathematical models that we integrate over time, and we can switch between all different patterns. So we can show the pattern up in this top voltage trace up above. This is a typical pattern for a relaxation oscillator or the Fitz-Uniguma. And these are the phase delays and how they converge as we change our input. So as we change a single parameter, we can change in between any of, in this case, four different solution spaces. Current status, we do have the working software prototype. I would love to do this in hardware, but of course that there's a lot more challenges to that. And as I said, I'm a mathematician, I may not be the best person to do hardware. We show that we can use this for decision making and switching between different solutions. So we also want to there's a couple other things that we need to do here. Future plans, we're investigate other output rhythms for convergence times. We want these convergence times to be quick so that we can switch quickly between sometimes rhythms take a little while to converge. And we also want to add, so what we have now is the brainstem interact. We have a way for a brainstem to interact with a multifunctional central pattern generator. Now we actually want to look at more of the direct sensory feedback that's coming from sensors that's inputting on the multifunctional central pattern generators. And then there's always optimization that we can do for a lot of things. Here's a list of references of different stuff. I don't know if these are made available to everybody or not. Good TED Talk. This is about the robot that swims like Salamander. Okay. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Jeremy.
I went kind of long. I apologize.
No, I appreciate it. Let me just maybe take 2 minutes for comments from the Shark panel.
Hey, Jeremy, this is Mike. I'll maybe jump in and start. So our organization has spent couple decades working with technical founders like yourself. And I would just give you some feedback right off the top that you went very technical very early and kind of stayed there. And that's not a criticism, but thinking about how you might pitch this, if you go back to, I think it was slide 8, if you wouldn't mind scrolling back. This one, yeah, 8. You nailed the last point you made on this slide, to me, might be where you start, is that this technology you're developing could potentially kind of disrupt current thinking around AI and ML. And then maybe then explain the difference between the technology you're bringing to market that's different than what's available now. And I think probably the main point of feedback I would give you is you're a great technical founder and you understand the subject matter extremely well. The gap you have is the business application. And I think as you keep maturing this, bringing in what I would call a business driver, just meaning someone that can come in and really work with you to think through what's the commercial application. That's the gap I'm seeing in your presentation right now, just because you're quite early. But I think, diverse teams from the perspective of experience and team members bringing things to the table that you might need to think about where you take this technology, I think you could really benefit from that.
No, I absolutely agree. I am not to be honest, I didn't realize that we could have patented this. It never occurred to me. It was actually one of the other contributors in the beginning for John Thurman, and Jason Guadagneri were the ones who really were like, oh, you could totally patent this. And I was like, I don't know anything about that. So I do totally agree. And I need to work on my business spiel. I guess I'm just not a great business guy. I like to be in the technical side. 100% agree though.